Hello everybody, my name's Beck. I'm the Director of Psychology and Psychotherapy for SLAM, and welcome to this broadcast in which we'll be having a conversation with Irene Sclare and Daisy Mercer about the Discover programme in our local schools. As you know, this series of broadcasts has been looking at how mental health services work closely with our community partners to deliver mental health care upstream and to make sure that we can be as involved and as useful as we can be in supporting those community assets to really ensure that we prevent the development of mental health problems wherever possible and address them as early as possible without people having to break down and need some of the more intense services that we provide in secondary care. So that's been particularly apparent during the pandemic, when we've seen huge discrepancies in health and social care inequalities, and I think probably become more aware than we ever have before of some of the populations, groups and clusters of population who are really most affected by those inequalities. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to, or I'd like to ask Irene and Daisy to introduce themselves and this very exciting project that they have been involved with for a number of years now. So Irene, can you introduce yourself, please? You'll have to move off mute. You're on mute.
Hi everybody, it's good to be here to talk about Discover. And I'm a consultant clinical psychologist. I work in South London and Maudsley in child and adolescent mental health services.
Thank you, Irene. And Daisy, could you introduce yourself?
Hi there, thanks so much for having me on today. I'm Daisy Mercer and I'm assistant principal in a school in Bermondsey, and I've worked with Irene for a number of years now with the Discover programme that we run here each year.
So can't wait to hear more about it. Sounds absolutely fantastic. So maybe Irene, you could start by telling us, what is Discover?
Sure. Fundamentally, we designed it to support older teenagers who are experiencing symptoms of anxiety, low mood, low self-esteem and high stress. These problems are really endemic in the lives of teenagers. And what we know from mental health is that the rates of mental health difficulties at this age group are high and rising and have long-term effects. So Discover is intended as an intervention both to catch and treat those difficulties and also build young people's resilience for the future. I don't know if you want me to say more, but primarily we bring the service to young people in school. There are no waiting lists, no formal referrals. We aim to be really non-stigmatizing, and we call the programme How to Manage Stress and Worry. And just to say, we developed this whole programme with groups of teenagers advising us, and we also evaluate the programme as we go along and have conducted research on it. So we know it's evidence-based and really acceptable. You're muted, Al. Sorry, Al, you're muted.
That's the first error of a host is to forget the basic etiquette of broadcast. So thank you for that, Irene. No, it's really interesting what you say, and I think we'll get into some of the detail of it in a minute. But maybe if I can turn to you, Daisy, first of all, and just ask you to give us some of an overview of what are the needs in the school at the moment. What are some of the problems that you're facing as a school and the young people are facing? So, you know, why is this work necessary?
So obviously, as Irene said, we work primarily with teenagers. So we've run this programme with the sixth formers. And I think that in the conversations I had with Irene specifically over the number of years we've worked together, the transition between secondary school and sixth form is a really challenging one for students. And it's where a lot of kind of mental health problems and anxieties arise. A lot of that is due to a lot of uncertainty. So a lot of uncertainty about the future, which leads a lot to kind of worry. And then kind of with that worry and anxiety comes the things like procrastination, struggling to manage deadlines and struggling to manage time. I think over the years we've identified that sleep is a really big problem for young people, especially in terms of kind of routines. And obviously that varies so much between family to family in terms of what the expectations are and kind of how people manage their sleep habits. And then obviously kind of on the more significant scale of that, we've got everything from kind of low level anxiety to students with more clinical needs who've had kind of more severe problems in the past. I think that where the program's worked really well is we've worked with students who haven't previously accessed any clinical services. So students who might be suffering with quite severe kind of depressive traits, where they've not kind of identified that in the past, and that can be down to a number of different reasons. And I think that in the most recent past, that worry and anxiety and uncertainty is obviously doubled, if not tripled, in young people. And I think just kind of not having those answers and not kind of having that resilience, as Irene's talked about, to kind of find those answers and feel like they're empowered to know what steps to take, means often we get students who are quite lost, who really struggle to kind of know how to move forward and get quite stuck. So that's kind of in a nutshell kind of where we then get students to kind of join and work with the Discover programme and the Discover team.
So that's really interesting. I think right now it might be good to have a clip from one of your young people and to hear what she's got to say about the programme, and then maybe we can come back to this issue of how things have been during the pandemic.
Hi guys, I'm Melissa, I'm 18, I'm from South East London where all the drama happens. I just moved back to London, so I was worried about getting a job, settling in again. Obviously, you just start stressing out and you become a procrastinator, and you don't want to do that. Like, you just want to get on with your things. I'll be thinking about my problem instead of just getting on with it. I'll be thinking about, oh, what about this happens, what about this happens. But yeah, that's how it affects me. When I'm stressed, I feel down. I just tend to overthink stuff, and say if I get in an argument, I just tend to give it my all rather than like just trying to find a solution to it or just ignoring it. So when Discover came to my school, it was actually bang on time for I think a lot of people, because it was before mocks, and you know, mocks are exams, and regardless of it not counting, not being a final grade, you still stress over it because you don't know if you're prepared or not. So they taught us skills to like deal with our stresses and like meditation. We did a couple of meditation practices that was very effective. I actually went on to download a meditation app. Discover just helped me personally. It's helped me like think. It's raised my self-awareness. If I'm about to do something, I think about it first. If I know that a situation is going to bring out the worst in me, I try to just keep myself calm and just think about what I'm going to say, because obviously everything that comes out your mouth affects other people. That's another thing. I've been trying to like understand others more, and because I've got a little bit of selfish traits, so I've been understanding others more and just trying to get people's view, even though it might contrast with mine. Like, I still listen to them and I don't give my all to situations. Yeah, I've got control of my anger a bit more, and it's helped me a lot, and it's helped like a lot of people in my school. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it because it's about us, and it is very person-centered. Like, it's about you, and you get to make a goal, and at the end of it, if you've accomplished it, then there's that sense of achievement which can drive you to do other great things that you might not think you're capable of. So yeah, I'll definitely advise it, and it's also good to raise mental health awareness, which is improving in 2019 but needs to carry on moving. So yeah.
She's a lovely young woman and seems to have benefited hugely from the programme. Can you tell us a little bit, Daisy, about I'm just really interested in the things that you were saying about things have doubled or tripled during the pandemic, that we're seeing more problems than we ever have before. Do you think that the nature of the problems have changed, or do you think they're the same sort of problems, you're just seeing them in greater volume? Could you say anything about the needs of during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think the needs are largely the same. I think they're magnified because of the situation, certainly. I know that when we were when students were at home, we were checking in with them on a regular basis, certainly the most vulnerable, just checking in with their mental health, how they're coping, kind of what their strategies are. But I think being in the same place all day, every day is really difficult. Trying for them to access their learning, when they're doing A-levels, and it's really challenging without the kind of direct support of their teachers, they very kind of quickly lose confidence in themselves and motivation for that. And I think that a lot of students who previously have struggled with kind of anxiety and well-being actually struggled really hugely with motivation during the lockdown. And I think that the way that they saw it was that there are the students who are really motivated and students who just kind of fell off the edge of the cliff, so to speak, and they just kind of stopped with their train of work. So I think that was particularly hard for them, because obviously they link that idea of being successful in their studies with what's going to come next. And for some of them, it led them to thinking, well, maybe I can't do what I thought I wanted to do later on. And that just kind of fills this whole negative cycle that they've got about kind of the situation and how they're going to move out of it. So I, for one, am very thankful that we're back in school and able to work with them face to face at the moment.
Thank you, Daisy. That makes me want to ask you, Irene, what's the magic here? How can you intervene with people? Well, especially, Daisy's really given that picture of a sort of downward trajectory, a sort of pattern of loss of confidence and, a lack of scaffolding around children to support them. What do you do then? You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Al. The programme is based on cognitive behaviour therapy, and we try to roll, I guess, what would be 6 or 7 CBT sessions for anxiety and low mood into one very intensive day. We also see people individually before and after the day workshop. So we publicise the programme at assembly and make it normalizing to experience stress, as we call it, or distress. And then we invite people to sign up for themselves. And I think that decision to make a change is carried all the way through, keeping people motivated to think that there are ways of being helped and to trust that we can understand what they're going through. And I think that's really, really important. Around 45 to 50% of the young people we see have what we might call adverse home circumstances. And that will mean that many of them are young carers, their parent has untreated mental illness, there are massive cultural factors which may mean that they wouldn't share their worries or concerns with parents who want the most for them. Very many high expectations, sometimes unrealistic all round. So I guess for us, one of our ways of working is to deliver something very kind of appealing, multimedia, as engaging as we can make it. And we're also quite personalising in the way that we come forward. We talk about we all get stressed, we normalise and reduce that stigma of getting help. And obviously our therapeutic training is kind of woven in all the way through. I think one of the other key things is we work very closely with teachers, so that we're not a kind of clinic in the school, but we're woven into the school framework, so that we appear at assembly with the head of sixth form, and we talk about how we all think this is a worthwhile thing for people to kind of prevent problems building up. For those young people, a big number who have current and quite increased problems, we'd be devising care plans with them, with their teachers, maybe with their parents too, and a small number might need referral on. But we do a lot of signposting, not just into traditional services, but creatively to think about what would help that young person in that moment to achieve what they need in their lives. So we did quite a lot of mental health risk work, but we also try to see that as very collaborative with them and with their school. So there's something about the tone in which we do things, and also the availability of our intervention and trying to make that very teen friendly, talking about real life problems. So most of the young people we see are exhausted, they're not sleeping well, they have all sorts of other problems relating to their mental health status. Worrying, excess worrying is a massive one, not being able to calm themselves, being very panicky, being unable to make decisions, and possibly not being able to see themselves as deserving support. So being in a group with others, seeing other people who look perfect and seem very cool but are just as agitated as them, is really, really part of the process. And the individual confidential meetings with us, where we can use our skills to identify key factors that need to be addressed outside of that framework as well. So it is intensive. We're around for about 4 months in the life of the school and with them. And we also do some kind of follow-up work, including working alongside those young people in thinking about their career or helping interview our own staff, that kind of way of working. Or some people have called it community psychology. Some people talk a bit about making CAM's work accessible, and it's a bit of both.
Thanks, Irene. And how's that partnership working from your point of view, Daisy? How's the it sounds like you're, right on the coalface of some of these health and social care inequalities that we've been talking about. You come right up close to some of the real difficulties that there are in society and the children who suffer as a consequence. How is this partnership working for you in terms of the work that you do to try and address that?
Yes, I mean, brilliant question, and I cannot advocate more for this programme. It's been such an incredible support for our school and for our students. I think that the space and the time that the students are listened to is invaluable, because, as Irene said, they have their initial one-to-one sessions and they're kind of about 40 minutes long. And what's really interesting is that a lot of the young people who are kind of suffering don't necessarily tell people at home, and they don't tell people at school, and things come out through these meetings that I wouldn't necessarily get out of a student from just kind of having a normal check-in with them. And it really allows us to then kind of put together a really tailored plan for either working with their teachers if they want academic support, or thinking about kind of how as a pastoral team we can kind of meet their needs, especially where through these conversations really specific kind of either adverse experiences at home have kind of arisen, or things that we didn't know about have kind of surfaced. It really allows us to then think about how are we going to support these students moving forward. So it's really powerful in that instance where there are those kind of acute needs. And I think that where they then have the telephone kind of follow-ups with the Discover team, and where they then have the kind of follow-up appointments, is really powerful, because it's not just one conversation, it's over a period of time. And it's really interesting to see kind of how the young people adapt to that over the period of time, and kind of how much they embrace that support. So it's such an extra kind of boost to what we're able to provide in school, as increasingly, we're talking about mental health and students are increasingly aware of it, but obviously kind of our resources are stretched kind of quite thin. And I think Irene also mentioned this idea of a care plan. We've actually adopted that as kind of our whole school approach to kind of dealing with students with severe anxiety or mental health concerns throughout the school. So in terms of how it's benefited us, we've taken a lot from that programme in terms of kind of how we work and how we action plan with young students.
Oh, thanks for that. So I'd like to invite the audience really to ask questions, and obviously I can pose those to you, or they can just make comments, and it would be really great to hear what people are thinking. I particularly wanted to know about, do you think that the young people who do access this programme are the people who need it the most? And if so, how do you think, Daisy, that the Discover programme manages to achieve that? And if it doesn't, what more could it do?
Sorry, can you just say that again?
So is the programme really reaching the young people it needs to? So are the people who you see with the greatest kind of health needs, mental health needs, distress, lack of confidence, are they reaching into the programme? Are they making use of it? Are they the ones, or is it perhaps the maybe slightly more middle class, slightly more well supported people who access this programme? Who uses it? Are the right people using it?
I think the way that we've approached it, certainly at my school, is that we hold the assembly and students then obviously decide if they want to do it. Knowing students who I think might be worthwhile attending, I will just kind of have a conversation with them and kind of maybe prompt them towards attending. Obviously, the students who attend need to be invested in it, and I think that in our experience, actually, the students who really want to seek that support, the ones who do attend and who do see that programme through. I think where we've got students who are previously accessing clinical services through CAMS, we tend to suggest that they kind of carry on with that, and that we try and then catch anybody else who isn't already receiving clinical support, just so that we can make sure that students who most need it are getting it. And there's always students who you think are fine, who then turn up to the programme, and then when they have their one-to-one, you realise that actually there's so much more going on there than you realise. So that's why it's so good, because yes, students, I think the right students are targeted and they have the opportunity to attend, and obviously us knowing the students means that we can then encourage that to happen. But then it always encourages students who you don't expect, who need that support, to engage with it. So yes, I think it does target the right students.
Irene, I wonder if I can ask you about the reach, the scale, the how far are you going with this programme? Do you feel that you're reaching the young people that you need to be reaching? What are you reaching into the areas, the schools that are most in need? And what's the next step, I guess?
Yeah, just wanted to let you know that from our evaluation, we know that 70%, that's over many years, that proportion is very similar. 70% who come forward have never accessed any form of psychological support. That would be of any type, not just a referral to CAMS, despite the needs that they have. About 45%, as I said before, have complex mental health needs, and many of them have really complex kind of psychosocial difficulties in their backgrounds as well. So we are pretty sure we're getting people of high need. We also get young people of lower need who this can be kind of early intervention, prevention for them. And we know the sorts of changes that they're making are relevant to them and lead them to feel more empowered to manage future difficulties. So that's really, really important. We also know that we're getting around many of the barriers that are culturally driven. So for some families, the idea of anyone going to see a psychologist, and that might be from any kind of background, would be seen as really unacceptable. These young people can come forward themselves and get specialist help from us. And we have an idea really also about where we would like to be going. I guess at the moment we're primarily in London and the southeast. We're thinking of 2 or 3 different directions. We're spreading into the regions through a randomised controlled trial in 4 different cities next year, which will be very exciting. But we're also doing 2 other things, and it's interesting to have Daisy alongside. We're developing a teacher resource pack for teachers to use to boost emotional well-being and mental health, and it's based on the Discover core concepts. And that's being led by Irene Parham and my team, which is at this stage, it's at a piloting stage and it's going to be rolled out. And secondly, there's a very vulnerable group of young people who are in public care. So they're in foster placements, getting ready to have to be independent at the age of 18. And we're developing a new adaptation of Discover for this very vulnerable group and thinking with them about how to make that accessible and kind of acceptable. We've been supported by the Maudsley charity very generously to develop and pilot that. And that's a really important partnership which we're doing with an organisation called First Star, who may be online at the moment, and really trying to extend to the most vulnerable groups. So it would be great to do more and more, and I guess we have to make sure we kind of build capacity in schools as well as continue to see young people ourselves. It's an important balance, I think.
So it sounds like you've been doing quite a lot of work to think about making sure that you're very accessible across a wide range of young people, and you've also been thinking about, you've been understanding your data and understanding, are you reaching those, you know, children with highly complex needs as well as children with less complex needs. Yeah. We've been asked a question from the audience really about the number of, you know, boys versus girls that access the service, the number of children who are BAME, you know, what about those sort of demographics?
Yeah, no, that's really, really important to us. And we really want our programme to be multicultural in its intent and reaching everybody from any ethnic background if possible. Our figures are that something like last year, and it's consistent finding, 78% of our young people were from a non-white background, and that's vastly different from mainstream CAM services, and is a reflection of where we go and in which schools, as well as our approach. We're less successful in engaging boys than girls, but that number in proportion is going up. We've seen about 2,500 young people so far, and I would say we're up to about a third of that group being young men. It's certainly the case that in all male schools, boys have no difficulty coming forward, but in mixed schools, girls are more likely to come forward than boys, and that's a kind of UK-wide feature, and maybe it's a gendered issue, though I'm aware that at the moment we're an all-female team, but we are constantly trying to make ourselves more accessible to young men.
And can you tell us, are there any differences in who does well in this programme and who doesn't do well in this programme?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Those with complex needs are doing well. We use outcome measures in anxiety, depression and well-being. And what we find is our programme makes a bigger impact on low mood difficulties than anxiety, which is very interesting. Anxiety and depression are comorbid. They exist together very frequently. And I think something about improving mood is something about building confidence, building motivation, building optimism that they can achieve something, and maybe having a skill set that works. So I think they're really good. We also have lots of views about feeling that they were helped by seeking help and having the confidence to reach help in future, which I find very gratifying. And
thank you, Irene. Daisy, from your point of view, do you have a sense of are there any children? How are the most isolated children responding to this programme? The children who probably, like you referred to, the children who are looked after, or the children who typically don't have that support network around them in quite the same way. What's your experience of them from a school's point of view?
I think in terms of the programme, I think last year we had a particularly vulnerable cohort of students, and actually we were really lucky because the team did kind of follow-up appointments with about 4 students. And I think within that kind of cohort of students, we'd had students who had suffered family bereavements and students who were dealing with some really complex needs. And actually, because of the programme and because we were able to put in that support, it meant that we could really focus on their well-being in school, and it meant they weren't kind of then isolated and marginalised within that. So I think, you know, that was a real success story for us last year, where we had those really acute needs within those students.
And the last question then for either of you is, you know, how many BAME employees do you have? How accessible is the workforce? How much are the young people able to identify with the workforce that you use to run these programmes? Who'd like to pick that up? Irene.
I'm very aware that we're a white female team at the moment, and I think we do our very best. We reflect what is pretty standard in mental health services that there are more women than men and more of us are white, but we are very aware of that in our team currently. We use 4 film characters, and we're very careful that they are from multicultural backgrounds and they act as role models within the workshop. And that's one of our ways to have a diversity in our intervention. But it is a real challenge, a continuing challenge for us.
And there's always more work to do in mental
Absolutely.
health, isn't there? So
Absolutely.
it sounds like this project is an absolutely fantastic one that has been really, really well received. And I can see we've had a lot of support from the audience as well. So it just remains really for me to thank you both, Irene and Daisy, for a really interesting interview. And I wish you all the best of luck with the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for listening as well. That's great.
Thanks very much.